Let's talk about some of the beliefs that come out of Islam. And I mean really sit with them, think about them, and ask whether they hold up when you apply basic logic and what we know about the world. Now, before we get into it, I want to be clear about something. This is not about Muslim people. Muslims are human beings like everyone else, curious, kind, complicated, capable of great things. This is about the ideas. Ideas are not people. Ideas can be questioned, challenged, and yes, sometimes found to be deeply wrong. And that's what we're doing here. So let's start with one of the most foundational beliefs in Islam, the idea that the Quran is the literal, perfect, unchanged Word of God. Muslims call this the concept of ijaz, the miraculous inimitability of the Quran. The claim is that no human being could have written it, that its literary quality is so extraordinary it proves divine origin. But let's actually think about this for a second. First, you have to already speak classical Arabic to appreciate the supposed literary beauty of the Quran. If you're a non-Arabic speaker, you're just being told it's beautiful. You're trusting someone else's judgment. That's a pretty shaky foundation for accepting something as the Word of God. Second, literary beauty, even if we grant that the Quran is genuinely beautiful, is not evidence of divine origin. Homer's Iliad is extraordinarily beautiful. Shakespeare wrote things that feel almost superhuman in their depth and precision. Nobody is claiming Zeus dictated the Odyssey. The argument that something is too good to have been written by a human is not a real argument. It's just admiration dressed up as theology. Now, let's talk about the claim that the Quran contains scientific knowledge that was impossible to know in the 7th century. This one gets repeated constantly. You'll hear things like, the Quran predicted embryology, the expansion of the universe, the water cycle, even the internet. Let me be honest with you about what's actually happening here. What people do is take a vague verse from the Quran, and then after modern science discovers something, they go back and say, see, it was right there all along. This is called retrofitting. It's reading modern knowledge backward into old text. If I write the words, the earth carries weight, I haven't predicted gravity. I've just written something vague that someone later decided matched a scientific discovery. The embryology example is the most famous one. Scholars like Keith Moore were cited to say the Quran accurately described stages of embryonic development. But when you actually look at the Quranic descriptions and compare them to what we know from modern embryology, you find that the Quran describes embryos going through stages that look a lot like what the Greek physician Galen was describing in the 2nd century, stages we now know are not accurate. So the Quran appears to reflect the best scientific thinking of its surrounding culture, not future knowledge. If the Quran really contained scientific knowledge ahead of its time, there's a simple test. It should tell us something we didn't know before we discovered it independently, not after, not in vague poetry that can be interpreted any way you like, but clearly, specifically, verifiably. It has never done that, not once. Now, let's talk about the concept of apostasy in Islam. This is one of the most philosophically troubling aspects of the religion. According to a wide consensus of classical Islamic scholarship, not fringe interpretation, but mainstream traditional scholarship, a person who leaves Islam should be killed. This is documented in the Hadith literature. The Prophet Muhammad is reported to have said, "Whoever changes his religion, kill him." This is in Sahih Bukhari, which is the most trusted Hadith collection in Sunni Islam. Now think about what this actually means. You are saying that a person who thinks for themselves, examines the evidence, and concludes that Islam is not true, that person deserves to die for that conclusion. You are saying that human curiosity and honest reasoning are capital offenses. There is no way to dress this up philosophically. It is the institutionalized punishment of thought. And the fact that many modern Muslims don't personally support this doesn't make the doctrine disappear. The doctrine is there. It's in the sources. It has been enforced throughout Islamic history, and it is still enforced in several Muslim-majority countries today. In countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, Afghanistan under the Taliban, and others, leaving Islam can mean imprisonment, violence, or death. When you punish doubt, you are admitting that your beliefs cannot survive doubt. A religion that needs the threat of death to retain its members is not a religion of truth. It's a religion of fear. Then there's the treatment of women embedded in classical Islamic jurisprudence. Let me give you specific examples rather than generalizations. The Quran in Surah 4:34 states that men are the maintainers of women, and if a wife is disobedient, her husband should first admonish her, then withhold intimacy, and then, and this is the text, strike her. Now yes, there are modern Muslims who interpret this verse softly or symbolically, but the word used in the Arabic, daraba, has been interpreted by the majority of classical Islamic scholars throughout history as permitting physical striking. This is not a fringe reading. The Quran also gives a woman's testimony half the legal weight of a man's testimony in financial matters. Surah 2:282 says when recording a financial contract, get 2 male witnesses or 1 male and 2 female witnesses, because if one woman forgets, the other can remind her. This is not metaphor. This is not context that gets explained away. This is a legal instruction that explicitly says women's minds are less reliable in legal matters. A woman inherits half of what a man inherits from the same parent. A woman needs her husband's permission in many classical Islamic interpretations to fast voluntarily, to leave the house, and even to refuse sexual relations, because classical Islamic law considers a wife's consistent refusal of her husband's sexual requests as a form of disobedience that angels curse her for. This, again, is in Sahih Bukhari.
Now, someone will say, but this was 7th century Arabia. It was progressive for its time. Maybe. But if the Quran is the eternal word of God, then it's not supposed to be just a little better than 7th century Arabia. It's supposed to be the final, perfect, timeless guidance for all of humanity. If God knew in eternity what modern human rights look like, why did his perfect book land so squarely in the assumptions of a 7th century patriarchal desert culture? Let's talk about hell. Islam has one of the most detailed and graphic descriptions of eternal torture in any religion. The Quran and Hadith describe a hell where people are burned, their skin replaced so they can be burned again, forced to drink boiling water that tears apart their intestines, beaten with iron rods. And who goes there? According to Islamic theology, anyone who dies without believing in Allah and accepting Muhammad as his prophet. It doesn't matter how good your life was. It doesn't matter how kind you were, how many people you helped, how honest you were in everything you did. If you never said the Shahada sincerely, you go to hell, permanently, forever. Think about a child born in rural Japan in 900 AD who had never heard of Islam. According to strict Islamic theology, that child, if she died without accepting the faith, faces eternal torment. Some scholars add a caveat that people who never received the message will be tested on Judgment Day, but for those who have heard and rejected it, eternal fire. That includes you watching this video if you've concluded Islam isn't true. An eternity of torture for a finite life of honest disbelief, even on the most basic intuitions of justice that humans across cultures recognize, that punishment should fit the crime, that permanence should match severity, this fails completely. Let's look at the life of Muhammad himself, because Islam asks you to accept him as the perfect moral example, the Uswa Hasana, the beautiful model. But when you actually read the historical sources, not critics of Islam, but Islam's own most trusted historical accounts, a complicated picture emerges. Muhammad married Aisha when she was 6 years old and consummated the marriage when she was 9. This is from Sahih Bukhari, the most authoritative hadith collection. Muslims are asked to accept this man as the moral ideal for all of humanity across all time. The response is often that childhood marriage was normal in 7th century Arabia, and that's probably true, but it creates a serious problem, because if Muhammad was just a product of his time and culture, then he's not a universal moral standard, he's a historical figure. And if he was a universal moral standard, then what he did should have been above his time, not embedded in its worst practices. Muhammad also ordered the killing of people who mocked or criticized him. The assassination of a poetess named Asma bint Marwan, who wrote verses criticizing him, is recorded in the Sirah literature. He approved the execution of the men of the Banu Qurayza, hundreds of men killed after surrender. He had people tortured for information about hidden treasure. These events are not the inventions of critics, they come from the Islamic historical tradition itself. If you showed a modern person the biography of any other historical or political figure with these actions and asked them to evaluate the moral character of that person, the evaluation would not be perfect model for all humanity. But because this person is the prophet of Islam, billions of people are told these actions were not only acceptable, but exemplary. There's also the issue of Jinn, supernatural beings made of smokeless fire who interact with humans, possess them, cause illness, and tempt people toward evil. Belief in Jinn is not optional in Islam. It's Quranically mandated. There is an entire chapter of the Quran named after the Jinn. According to Islamic theology, mental illness, some physical illness, and strange behavior can be attributed to Jinn possession. In many Muslim communities, the response to psychiatric symptoms is exorcism, ruqya, recitation of Quran over the afflicted person to drive out the Jinn. The real-world consequences of this belief are serious. People with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, epilepsy, and other neurological conditions have historically, and in some communities continue to be subjected to religious rituals instead of medical treatment. People have died as a result of exorcism practices in Muslim communities. The belief in supernatural possession is not a harmless spiritual metaphor when it actively replaces medical care. And then there is the Islamic concept of qadr, divine predestination. Everything that happened was decreed by Allah before creation. Every birth, every death, every sin, every act of kindness, all written before the universe began. And yet you will be judged eternally for the choices you made. You will be sent to heaven or hell for how you lived. But if God already decreed it all before you existed, in what meaningful sense did you choose anything? Islamic theology has wrestled with this question for 1,400 years and never produced a satisfying answer, because there isn't one. You cannot have both complete divine predestination and genuine human moral responsibility. They contradict each other, and yet both are required beliefs in mainstream Islamic theology. What I've laid out here are not misrepresentations. These are beliefs sourced from the Quran, from Sahih Bukhari and Muslim, the most trusted hadith collections, from classical Islamic jurisprudence, and from the historical record that Muslim scholars themselves produced. These are not cherry-picked obscurities. They are central, mainstream, foundational aspects of the religion, as it has been understood and practiced by the majority of Muslims throughout most of Islamic history. Questions are not attacks. Thinking is not disrespect. And when we look honestly at what any system of ideas actually claims and actually requires, we are doing the most important thing a mind can do.